You're listening to This Week in America with Rick Bratton.
Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America, website thisweekinamerica.us. With us on the program is Stuart Blyth. As mentioned, he is a successful global business leader, has been for over 20 years. He is a successful businessman as well as an author. He's a creator and CEO of From Pitch to Boardroom, the book and the training philosophy, an innovative and forward-thinking training and events company that uses the principles of team excellence in football management to improve business performance. He's the author of the new book, Football Field to Boardroom, the playbook for creating world-class business teams. It's a fascinating concept, and Stuart is with us on the program. Stuart, welcome to This Week in America. It's great to have you with us on the program.
Thanks for inviting me, Rick.
And Stuart, by the way, is coming to us via Skype from England, where he is based. This is such an interesting concept, and when you and I first talked, it was just a little bit after the Super Bowl. And you said everything was fine with the Super Bowl, except they had the wrong MVP. It really needed to be John Elway. And when you explained it, it's like, that really makes sense because that Denver Broncos wouldn't have been the Denver Broncos that we saw in the field that day without John Elway. Talk about that and why, even though we saw the players out there performing that day, it really took a masterful touch to put that team together.
That's absolutely right, Rick. I mean, when I was watching the Super Bowl and the playoffs, it was a question of which team was going to come out on top. And what I found was that the coaching in any professional sport is critical to any team's success. So looking at the way the Broncos had set up only 2 years before, where they were the best offensive team in the league, to transform that to a defensive number one was absolutely a stroke of genius. And that is something that was in the strategy, and it was something that was played for. So you have to look at who lays down that strategy in order to be that successful.
And it's interesting because, as you point out, in your business life, you spent a number of years basically team building. And when you lay out your study here, it really is obvious that you build a business team the same way you do a professional sports team, don't you?
Well, you would think that would be the case. But in reality, that isn't the way it works. Most business leaders that we come across are either handcuffed or hamstrung by some corporate policies that don't allow them to put a vision into place because there's too much short-termism going on. And we go and we work with a number of organizations, and we'll work with the business team and we'll ask them to lay it out in football format. And you wouldn't believe the number of people who are running teams that have 4 quarterbacks on the field at any one time. And to us, it makes absolutely no sense to be doing that.
Which is why this book is so important. It's called Football Field to Boardroom, the playbook for creating world-class business teams. Stuart Blyth is our guest on the program. The website is footballfieldtoboardroom.com. You can link onto our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and go directly to Stuart's website and get the information. In fact, in the book you talk about, you often hear the expression, let managers manage. And you say in reality, that's rarely what's allowed to happen. The courses are geared to, showing people how to function in a functional job is what I'm trying to say, rather than an actual job. Talk about the difference, because I think you were alluding to that as you were just talking there. We're really not taught to let them manage, are we?
I think that's absolutely part of the problem, that good leaders find it very difficult to manage within a corporate structure. What we really want them to do is to coach. It's not any accident that whether you're looking at professional sports outfits, orchestras, or actors, they are all coached to be the best that they can. So what we really need our business leaders to be are coaches. And we allude to this in the book, Football Field to Boardroom, the playbook, because if you have the capability to coach your team without being involved in every part of each project, you can effect a much better result. You need to have that objectivity, because you wouldn't have seen John Elway run onto the pitch in the Super Bowl if the Broncos were losing. But too often business managers are doing that.
The book is called Football Field to Boardroom, the playbook for creating world-class business teams. Believing that football management techniques and philosophies hold the key to unlocking business potential. Stuart Blyth, an athlete, sports fanatic, British management training consultant, successful global business leader for over 20 years, our guest in the program. In fact, you make a case that the leader's real job is to build an environment where the most talented people in the industry want to work, and then do whatever you can basically to get out of the way and let them to do what they do best, which is achieve, to get results.
Rick, you're right on the money there. Why would you employ a highly paid executive and then put lots of roadblocks in their way to success? You wouldn't.
No.
So when you look at football and you look at everything that is done in order to allow the football players to perform, that's why you get the end result. Because the coaching staff and everybody else is taking all of the extraneous work away from them in order that they can perform to their best. So don't go and employ a very expensive executive and then stop them doing their job.
The book is an excellent read. Football Field to Boardroom, the playbook for creating world-class business teams. Stuart Blyth, our guest on the program. It's interesting, growing up, you were an athlete. You were very interested in that. Yet it was years later in your business career, and I want you to talk about that eureka moment when suddenly you realized, I could take what I learned and still observe in watching sports, apply that to business, and I think I've got something here that's going to be very successful and revolutionized the way businesses go about conducting their day-to-day affairs.
I think there was a run-up to a eureka moment, Rick. Throughout my professional career working within very large corporates, you have a number of instances, and I'm sure that many of the listeners have as well, where they've either witnessed some poor management or they've experienced some poor management, but they don't really know how to deal with it, and they don't really know what the answer is. And I guess after, as you say, 20 years as a business executive, there came a moment where I just sat back and I thought, there has to be a better way of managing people, because at the end of the day, it is the people in your business that make the profits and not the products. So you have to be able to treat your people the best that you possibly can. And I was looking for something outside of the business world that I could study and research in terms of who knows how to deal with people, who knows how to deal with egos, who knows how to deal with very talented individuals. And it became so obvious to me that I had to look at sports. Not only are the sports coaches super intelligent in the way in which they deal with their people, but they also have to do it in the most difficult of environments that I've ever come across. When you think about it, each head coach of a sports team has a 360-degree review every 2 or 3 days. So that means that everybody on the planet, whether it's the owners, the fans, the sponsors, the team, the general public, believe they have the right to tell the head coach whether they're doing a good job or not. To me, that is really difficult, to be able to maintain your cool and maintain your professionalism in order to maximize your team's performance.
With us on This Week in America, Stuart Blyth, author of the book Football Field to Boardroom, the playbook for creating world-class business teams, a successful business leader for over 20 years. His website is footballfieldtoboardroom.com. And as we see in business, where when you're at the top of a business, if you make a mistake, a number of mistakes, you can literally lose hundreds of millions of dollars. That's the same in sports, isn't it? If they make big mistakes and they don't draft the right people, they release somebody too early, they don't adapt to changing playing styles, they can also cost their franchises hundreds of millions of dollars.
That's absolutely right. The calls and the strategy that are made by the coaches in a football team are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And it's worth hundreds of millions of dollars, whether it's television income, whether it's sponsorship income, advertising income, whatever it is, that's how much those calls are worth. So when a business leader makes a call and the result is negative because of that call, it could take months before anybody understands what was done. So what you end up with is an opportunity for the business leader who's made the wrong call to play the blame game. You cannot do that in front of a 100 million person audience.
No, and you talk about one of the things that's interesting. You talk about imagine yourself, if you're a business executive, standing up in a post-game press conference, and you've got the cameras, you've got the lights, and they're firing off questions. And I'm thinking, there is a great similarity there. Business people don't have to go through this necessarily, but facing the same questions the coaches does, because you answer for recruiting, you answer for training, you answer for execution, all of this. So if you see yourself as a businessman having to answer those questions, it does bring a unique perspective to their roles, doesn't it?
It does bring a unique perspective. It's very interesting, and I've been to hundreds of stockholders meetings, and you watch the president and the chief executive roll out the results for the corporation, and you know that this has all been rehearsed and practiced. But when it comes to the point where the stockholders are allowed to ask questions, or the analysts are allowed to ask questions, how carefully are those questions fielded and vetted before they're actually answered? Imagine if you're a CEO of a corporation and you have to do that every 2 or 3 days. That is really, really tough.
And there's something, I guess, to be said about having to verbalize. There's something, in your mind, you're thinking this through, but when you're actually saying the words, you can actually hear what you're saying. That gives you, again, a sort of a different verbal perspective on actually what you're saying. And if it sounds like this really doesn't come out right, maybe the philosophy isn't all that solid.
Correct. And once you start to bluff your way through the answers, yes, everybody can see it.
We're rapidly running out of time, and Stuart will be back with us on the program. The book, Football Field to Boardroom, the playbook for creating world-class business teams. Footballfieldtoboardroom.com is the website. Link on to it directly by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us as well. You talk about the culture of settling, and this is something that I've thought about for years. And talk about that, because so often it seems like, maybe we stop a little bit short of the goal, where we want to get to, because we're settling for where we are, and it's okay. It's fine. It's not necessarily where we want to be, but it's not necessarily a negative situation either, and we settle for that. Talk about the culture of settling.
The culture of settling is interesting from the point of view. When I was working in the corporate world, a lot of my colleagues were always looking for a win-win situation. And whilst that sounds like a great idea, in a win-win situation, everybody is really settling for a suboptimal position for their own corporation. When you look at sports teams, there is no concept of settling for that win-win situation. They have to win. And so that mentality drives the best forward and the weak fall by the side. When you're looking for a win-win in corporate life, sometimes it allows the weak to survive. And we really need to be very mindful of the fact that we may be propping up organizations that shouldn't really be surviving.
Interesting concept, and I wish we had more time. A couple of minutes left. I'm going to stretch this a little bit because so many things to talk about. Footballfieldtoboardroom.com is the website. Football Field to Boardroom, the playbook for creating world-class business teams is the name of the book. You mentioned earlier that when you sit down sometimes and you talk with business people and you're using the concept of sports teams and how successful sports teams can relate to business teams as well. And you've got the business guy there and you realize you've got 4 quarterbacks. And these are 4 really talented quarterbacks. How difficult is it to explain to them on paper, this may look great, but you really need a special teams player. You need a punter there as well, and maybe one really good quarterback and a good backup. How difficult is it? Because I'm sure they think, I've got my dream team together because these are all outstanding quarterbacks.
That's a very, very interesting question, Rick. When we sit down with our clients and we ask them to physically draw their team in a football formation, they're the ones that come to realize that they actually have 4 quarterbacks on the field, which is a light bulb moment for them, because they then turn around and say, why have we got too many people playing the same role? And the question that we go back with is, that's a really good question. Why have you? And then they start to think about, perhaps we don't have the right structure here. Perhaps if we take one of these quarterbacks out and we put them in another initiative where there are no quarterbacks, that gives us the opportunity to bring in some special teams people, because this is what this initiative requires. And the thing that they love and we love about it is, because you can draw it on a whiteboard or create a PowerPoint slide or use our business strategy game to visually see what you've got as a team formation, it becomes very obvious about what you need to do. And it's down to the vision of the leader to decide what the formation is.
The book is called Football Field to Boardroom, the playbook for creating world-class business teams. Stuart Blyth is the author, B-L-Y-T-H. We'll have Stuart back in the program. Broken down in a couple of different sections, what makes a dream team, and you point out they don't just happen. You have to create that team and completing the dream team ecosystem. And there's so much that goes into building blocks, essential building blocks to put this team together. It is such a fascinating concept, and one that has so many similarities, what happens in sports to what happens in the business world. Stuart, it's been great having you on the program. So much more to talk about. We will have you back, and great having you here. And I'll be watching sports a little bit differently now. I'll be doing sports, watching as homework. I'll be taking notes, but doing it a little bit differently now, a little bit different perspective. And I think from a fan standpoint, once they start watching, they'll understand exactly what you're talking about in concepts, and whether this coach, this manager, really is adept at these business practices. And as a businessman, you're going to look at it a little bit differently. In fact, do you get that comment from people that, it's changed my perspective? It's now just sort of recreational watching. That's not the case anymore. I'm trying to get some ideas.
Absolutely. I mean, we often get comments from people that say, oh yeah, I see it now. Intuitively, I knew what I was watching, but I had no way of figuring out what was going on. But what we do is we've provided the link for them to transfer that intuitive knowledge into their business. And they love that connection, because every time they watch a game, every time they read something about it, it's reinforcing the basic concepts.
And you hear all the time when the successful coaches, when they're doing interviews and profiles, so often they point out he knows each individual player. He knows what buttons to push. He knows their role. So they get just as much out of a special teams player as they do out of the star quarterback, which is needed. So again, those similarities are striking you. But on a business team, I'm sure you need to know everybody, and you know their strengths and weaknesses.
Yes. What we found in our research that was a real eye-opener for myself is that when you're the head coach of a football team or a basketball team or a soccer team, you're really just dealing with the personalities. They take the view that if you didn't have the right skills and level of skills to be in the roster, you wouldn't be on the training field. So I don't have to worry that you haven't got the basic skills. Now what I have to do is turn your basic skills into world-beating skills through our personal relationship. I need you to want to go out there and play and die for me, because that's how we're going to be successful. I don't need to worry about, can you throw the ball, can you catch the ball? You can do that, otherwise you wouldn't be with us. What too many corporate leaders worry about is, have I got the right skills? When actually it's attitude that really counts, and the relationship that counts.
Fascinating discussion, and we will continue this. Stuart Blyth has been our guest on the program. Athlete, sports fanatic, British management training consultant, successful global business leader. He is the creator and CEO of From Pitch to Boardroom, the book and the training philosophy, author of the new book, Football Field to Boardroom, the playbook for creating world-class business teams. Website very simple, footballfieldtoboardroom.com. You can link on directly by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Stuart, thank you for being with us on the program. Look forward to having you back. Thank you for being with us. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rick. Look forward to speaking to you again.
We will do that again. Stuart Blyth, our guest on the program. The book, once again, Football Field to Boardroom, the playbook for creating world-class business teams. Information, of course, available at our website, thisweekinamerica.us.